So today I want to make a video about congruency content. This is a type of content that aims to make you feel a specific feeling, and it constructs a narrative and viewing experience around this goal. So inherently, it's not questioned whether this is the right way to feel about it. It's just kind of assumed that this is the way you should feel, and it just tries to deliver on that promise. I want to be clear that there might be other types of content out there. Well, I think there for sure are. Something like non-congruent content, this is content that tries to make you feel the opposite of something, or the opposite of a specific feeling. And then maybe something like exploratory content or wide-ranging content that doesn't really promise anything in particular. It's just kind of open and tries to deliver some kind of, maybe something else like truth or some kind of facts to you. I'm going to save videos on those for another day. Today, we're just going to focus on congruency content. So I want to go over a few things real quick. One is, how do you know if you're seeking congruency content? Then I want to go over a few experiences that kind of come with watching congruency content. We'll go over a few ways of how can you know whether the content that you're watching is congruency content or not. And then I want to go over some advantages and disadvantages of congruency content. This is kind of why people might watch this stuff. And then the last part I want to leave you with is how to get out of watching congruency content. And what this means is if you're stuck in the cycle of watching the same thing over and over, how can you get out of that? How can you get out of watching the same thing again and again and again? We'll talk about that. So how do you know if you're seeking congruency content? So one is there will oftentimes be a pattern to the type of content you watch, and there's a long-term desire to experience a similar feeling throughout that content, to watch the same kind of content and get the same kind of feeling. So what this might mean is you might find yourself watching the same kind of content over and over in a seemingly unsatisfiable way. You keep watching it and you just can't ever get enough, really. Another thing is this feeling might leave you feeling kind of disappointed if a specific feeling isn't felt during or after watching this. And so if you rely on the content to give you certain types of feelings, your mind's going to anticipate this reward. It's going to anticipate feeling this way after watching it. And if you don't get that, if somehow the content doesn't live up to that, it can leave you kind of feeling unsatisfied, and you get a little bit of withdrawal and some stress around that. Interestingly, I think this is why the algorithm, like the YouTube algorithm, prefers content creators that make the same kind of content day after day, over and over, because if it can produce a similar kind of feeling in people, then people are more likely to watch it because it's giving them that feeling, and then the algorithm will suggest that content because then, there's kind of a mutually agreed upon feeling that the content creator is going to produce and the consumer is going to get. And it's reliable. So another thing is the content oftentimes makes you feel like you want more of it, and there's not much flexibility in terms of the variation of experience that you'd feel. And so a lot of times people want just more content, right? It's exciting when content producers produce this just more of the same, or you might find a new content creator that has a whole bunch of videos that are kind of similar to one another, and you just watch all of them because it's so exciting and you have this whole wealth of videos to choose from that will all kind of make you feel something similar. So some experiences that come from feeling this is that you might feel like you watch the same type of content every day. A lot of times when you feel like you watch the same kind of content, it can be hard to kind of pull apart the individual experiences of those videos that you've watched over a long period of time. So if you've been watching a podcast for, many months, maybe a year or two, and you look back and you try and think about what you've actually learned from that or things that you've taken away from that content, it can be hard to do if it's congruency content. If you're just watching it for a specific feeling, then all of a sudden you watch it and it doesn't really have any use outside of the time that you're watching it, maybe a little bit of like afterglow that comes afterwards. It's really just there to create a specific feeling in you. And so then when you look back at all the content you've watched, even though it seems like maybe educational or maybe it seems like you would have gotten some information from it, it's actually really hard to pull apart what you've actually learned from that. Might even make you feel like it's kind of a blur of content. It's one big mass of content that you've watched, and you don't really know the individual pieces very well. So this is an interesting thing also. I find this very, very interesting, is that the content becomes less and less interesting or intense over time as your mind gets used to it. It kind of builds up a tolerance. And so two things oftentimes happen from this. One is, as you get more dissatisfied with the same content that's being produced, you stop watching it as much. And so you just stop watching it, you stop engaging with it, maybe you just stop watching it like altogether, because it used to provide a strong feeling, and that content has kind of become the same, that content is still the same over time, and you've built up a tolerance to it, and so now it doesn't have the same feeling for you. It doesn't produce the same feeling, and so you kind of become disinterested. The other thing that can happen is the content creator tries to bump it up a notch with every single video. And I feel like a really good example of this is Mr. Beast. Every single video he does just seems like it somehow gets slightly more intense. And so even if after the last video you felt like that was it, that was the top experience, he's got another one ready for you to experience that just a little bit more. And that leaves people coming back. And I think it's why his channel is so popular and so successful in this way with engagement, because no one stops watching him. Because if they like him, they're just going to keep watching him because he promises more and more every single video. Even though he promises more, it is a similar feeling. People watch it for the same kind of feeling. It's not like he's delivering different content all the time. It's basically just the same kind of experience of entertainment and some excitement and some kind of craziness, if you will. But it's the same style of feeling. It's just like getting like cheesier mac and cheese, and you just keep adding more and more cheese and condensing it down, and then you add cheese powder and more cheese. It's still mac and cheese, but I guess, if it's cheesier every time, then it has this feeling of, oh, it's going to be even cheesier next time. It's totally random. Okay. So one thing to check in with is this content congruency content? Or put another way, am I consuming this content with the attitude or the desire for it to be congruent with me? Am I looking for it to fulfill a specific feeling, and is it doing that? Am I stuck in a cycle of needing it to fulfill that emotional need? So one thing is, you'll feel kind of constricted, that there's not a whole bunch of emotions you feel when you're watching it. If you're watching Mr. Beast, if you're watching David Goggins, it's not like David Goggins is going to produce a whole wealth of different types of feelings. He's there to do one thing, and that's motivate you. Maybe make you feel a little bit down on yourself and that you could be better if you worked out more. That's it. That's all he's trying to do. And he's just going to do that every single time you watch his videos. Another interesting thing is the different forms of a similar type of content will make you feel the same way. One example is if you're watching different sports highlights, you might feel the same even though you're watching a whole bunch of different sports. You're watching boxing highlights, baseball highlights, basketball highlights, football highlights, soccer highlights, ping pong highlights, top plays. And all you're walking away with is like, oh, that's pretty cool. Wow, amazing. And it's kind of this just superficial appreciation of it. There's no real sense of engaging with ping pong content in a different way than you do the boxing content. They're just kind of, wow, really cool. And that means that even though these are different types of content, you could feel very differently watching these and really paying attention to the intricacies of them. The experience, the felt experience is just the same. This kind of general amazement and, kind of awe or skill, and that's it. And that generally speaking means this has become congruency content. You're watching it for a desire for it to be congruent, to produce a specific feeling. And that's actually a common thing throughout congruency content, is that it will make you feel a certain way. And that certain way is kind of an undeveloped feeling. And so a lot of times that feeling, since it's the same feeling being produced, you'll kind of experience it in a similar way. You might hear the same kind of thing. You watch David Goggins, I got to start working out. Oh man, I really got to start working out. You watch a whole bunch of news. You say, oh, the world's doomed. You scroll on Reddit, late stage capitalism, world news. the world's doomed, I just can't imagine, the world getting any better. Like I was saying, you watch sports, you go, wow, that's awesome. You watch some nature documentaries, you go, wow, that's pretty cool. It's creating this feeling, and that feeling kind of has no real outlet. It doesn't really get expressed in any way. It just kind of bubbles up as this little thought experience, oh, cool. And that oftentimes means that this is a cycle of congruency content. You're stuck watching the same thing over and over, trying to create that feeling, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't do much. It just kind of subsides. And then there you are watching the content again to kind of ride this little roller coaster of feeling it, and then it goes away, and feeling it, and it goes away. What are some advantages of congruency content? Like, why do people watch this stuff? Why do people get themselves stuck watching the same thing over and over? One is it can actually be really useful and impactful, specifically in the beginning. So like, let's say I've never worked out and I want to work out, and I go watch David Goggins, and he's super fit, and he's like, you just gotta do 50 pull-ups, 50 push-ups every day, and like, you're gonna be ripped in a year, or whatever. I go, wow, I really, I didn't know what to do, and that's a pretty clean, easy thing to follow. I'm just gonna do that, and then boom, it works. But let's say for some reason, this is the disadvantage though, is that even though it can work, right? Wow, I can watch, some boxing highlights and then want to go join a boxing gym because it looks really cool, and like, I want to engage with it, and I want to do something similar. Awesome, that's cool. But let's say I meet some resistance. Somehow I can't get myself to join the boxing gym. I can't get myself to do 50 push-ups, 50 pull-ups every day, and I just sit here and don't do anything. Well, now what? Tomorrow, when that same feeling comes up of wanting to do something, I might go watch the same content. But that content hasn't addressed any of those obstacles or those internal resistances. And so then I experience the same thing. I watch the video, I feel motivated, but then I meet some resistances, and then I don't do anything until the next day. And then you keep going, and you're stuck, and eventually your tolerance towards the video builds. It becomes even less effective at motivating you. The resistances still stay, and then you're not doing anything. And then you're stuck watching the content, wanting to do it, and not being able to. This content tends to reliably create a similar feeling. It can be hard to identify what the feeling is that's being produced, and I think that's really important. That'll come up later in how to get out of watching this, is trying to build awareness around those feelings. But it creates a similar feeling, and it never questions why you might need that. If you're watching some stuff that you really feel like, I don't want to be watching this, or I don't want to be stuck watching, something ridiculous or silly or useless. The content doesn't want you to question whether you want to watch it again or want to watch more of it, because it wants engagement. YouTube wants you to engage. If you're stuck late at night, watching the same kind of stuff over and over again, the content isn't going to give you the tools to get yourself out of that. It just wants you to engage more. It's just going to try and stay interesting or keep delivering that feeling, and then it kind of leaves you hooked in a way. You just need more of it, and that there's nothing in the content that helps you get out of it. This is different than something like, it's not exactly this way, but like something like food. If you have a desire for food, you eat the food, and in the food, there's the fullness, if you will. Go with the analogy here, that when I eat the food, I become full, and that leaves me able to walk away from the food. But content's kind of different, even you just kind of can always want more in a way. And the content itself won't help you satisfy it. It just gives you more, not satisfaction. So how to get out of watching congruency content? I think the first step is you have to build awareness. You have to recognize that you're in it. First of all, you have to know that it's a thing, that you can get stuck in the cycle, why it's a cycle. So you have to learn that. And then trying to figure out, okay, what types of content do I watch? Maybe just for the feeling they provide. And how can I get myself out of that? Or how do I get myself stuck into that? And you can start to explore these things a little bit more once you know that it's something that you do. So one kind of trick to this is, a lot of times this congruency content, it satisfies a need. Everyone wants to feel excited or happy or motivated, but if it's the only place that you can get it, if all the other places in your life are hard to feel this, then the content becomes kind of a saving grace. It becomes the sole thing that gives it to you. And then it becomes very, very important. You just want more and more of the same kind of content because none of the other places in your life give it to you. And so one thing that can be really useful is if you find yourself watching the same kind of content over and over, is to ask yourself, where else might I feel this? Where else do I feel this feeling? Or where else might I feel it? Or have I felt it in the past? What else made me excited? Or what else made me feel motivated? Or what else made me feel happy like I do when I watch this stuff? What else made me feel skillful or kind of in awe of something as I do when I watch this stuff? And if you can figure out where else you felt that, maybe you might start to uncover why you can no longer experience it that way, or why you're so stuck on needing to watch the content instead of experiencing it kind of outdoing something. And that exploration of trying to figure that out, where else it is that you can experience that, can be a pretty good clue as to how you got yourself stuck. Or how you got stuck. I don't think it's fair to say you got yourself stuck. One other thing to add on to this is when you identify those other places, a lot of times there will be some kind of obstacle or resistance that has made it so that those things have dropped out in your life. So maybe, you used to work out a whole bunch, but then you injured yourself, and now it's kind of scary to go back and work out because you're worried about injuring yourself again. And so now you're kind of stuck. You watch motivational content because you want to be into it. However, the fear is too much. You can't get yourself to go back. And so then you're kind of stuck in this place. And maybe if you could actually go back and overcome that fear, you wouldn't need the motivational content because you can just work out and enjoy it that way. So one interesting thing is you actually don't need to stop watching the content. It's not that the content is necessarily the problem. I mean, I've called this video Congruency content, and I think there are content creators or there are types of content that seek to really just produce a similar kind of feeling over and over, kind of feelings-based content. But that's not necessarily the problem here. Content is made to make you feel a certain way. The problem is that you can get stuck in a cycle where that's the only way that you can feel that. The only way you can experience that emotion is through this content. There's no other choice for you. You're stuck watching it to get that feeling, and that can be particularly problematic. And so, like I was explaining, in trying to develop other ways that you can balance out where you can get this feeling, finding other opportunities for you, other paths to experiencing this, a lot of times the content kind of drops off. It becomes less interesting. And sometimes the content is so interesting that you still engage with it sometimes, but it doesn't have the same kind of constricting feeling or this kind of craving feeling where you really feel like you need it, because it's just one of the many ways that you can experience it. Okay, I hope this video was useful for someone out there. I do enjoy making these. I think I'm going to try and make some more videos on the other types of content that I've seen, and also maybe diving into what are the different types of congruency content, really expand and trying to explore certain types of congruency content. I also want to let people know that I'm going to leave a link in the description below. I do coaching with people, kind of like life coaching. I teach people meditation. And one thing that I do is I try and focus on people's, kind of internal thoughts and feelings and the actions that they take, and helping people get unstuck in life, or helping people take actions that they want to do or limit actions that they don't like doing. And part of this exploration of trying to figure out where these actions come from, how you got yourself here, is something I really enjoy exploring with clients because it tends to be pretty useful, especially if you have a hard time doing this by yourself. And so if that's something that's interesting to you, please just fill out the form and get in contact with me. I'd be happy to work with you. Oh, also, if you have something that you think would be interesting for me to cover, or a specific type of congruency content you think would be interesting for me to cover, also go ahead and maybe leave a comment about that. I'd be happy to check that out. And I really appreciate you watching this video. I really hope it helps you in some way.